Welcome to everyone who has joined the webinar and to those viewing the posted recording at a later date. I am Matt with the Illinois River Watershed Partnership, and also joining me is Shelley with H2 Ozarks, formerly known as Ozarks Water Watch. We promise not to take up too much of your time this evening, although we're off to a rousing start with that. And please note that the links to both the recorded webinar itself and the presentation slides that we're presenting from will be posted on each of our websites. As many of you know, our organizations have similar missions to one another, centered on protecting and improving water quality in our respective watersheds. And we are both very pleased to now be entering our second year managing septic remediation programs that support that mission. Our purpose this evening is to provide a synopsis, a summary of what these programs are, as well as insight and direction geared specifically toward you all, the wastewater professionals whose work and participation is so central, is so critical to the success of this initiative. So as an overview, the initiative is funded by the Arkansas Department of Agriculture Natural Resources Division, that's ANRD, through a Clean Water SRF grant. Both programs actually launched concurrently in March of last year, with the first couple of months of the year being taken up with administrative things was set up for the program. We each have $1 million to spend over 3 years, with the grant periods expiring in December of 2023. The purpose of the grant is, again, a clean water initiative or a water quality initiative to provide assistance to eligible homeowners whose septic system is failing and support the repair or replacement of those failing systems. The eligibility requirements are pretty simple or pretty straightforward. The first is that a project be located in one of our 2 priority watersheds. That's the Illinois River Watershed or the Beaver Reservoir Watershed. The second requirement is that a system must be confirmed as failing by the Department of Health, and we're working very closely with our local county health units, the EHSs at those units, to make that determination. Any homeowner meeting these requirements is eligible to participate in the program. So this slide is an overview of the area in Northwest Arkansas that we're talking about that's addressed by the program, and to elaborate on what we mean by the term watershed. So a watershed is all of the land area that drains, i.e. sheds the water, to a given point. So unlike political boundaries like states and counties and that kind of thing, watershed boundaries are determined by natural features, elevation, aspect, slope of the land itself. And that yields these sort of funny topography-driven shapes that, but you can see between the 2 watersheds, illustrated in green and blue on the slide, that the program covers a significant portion of Northwest Arkansas, including the majority of Washington and Benton counties. The URL at the top of this slide is a tool that's provided by the U of A CAST team. That's the Center for Advanced Spatial Technologies, and it allows you to enter any address in the state of Arkansas into that tool, and that will provide the watershed that the address is located in. So it's a very, very helpful tool. This next slide is just kind of a general overview of the program, just sort of a nutshell of how it works. Approved homeowners work directly with licensed DRs and installer contractors. And again, that agreement is between the homeowner and the contractor. So when payment is made, the homeowner makes payment to the DR and or the installer. I just want to make that clear, because I know there's been some confusion on that, particularly in how that differs from other programs that have come and gone in the past. There is a $30,000 funding limit per project. Funding is provided to the homeowner as a combination of grant and zero interest loans. There is no income restriction. That the income was not listed in our program eligibility criteria that we mentioned a moment ago. High income households are eligible to participate just as well as low income households. But household income does determine what percentage of the funding can be provided as grant versus loan. And that proportion, or that percentage sliding scale, is indicated in the table on the right hand of this slide. The next thing we want to point out is that this is a reimbursement program. So money is issued by the state, depending on when the project is completed, 3 to 6 weeks following that project completion. We then distribute payment to the homeowner as a reimbursement for the project. And it's very important for us, a very important part of our communication to the homeowner throughout their participation is to have a good understanding of what their payment terms are in their agreement with the contractor, with the DR and with the installer prior to services being rendered, prior to construction. If they're not able to pay for the project at completion, then we certainly want we want the installer to be aware of that. And by the same token, if the installer is going to require payment at completion of the project, then we want the homeowner to have a good understanding of that and avoid any surprises coming after the project is completed. On this slide, we also want to note that the program funding is for failing systems only, and new construction is not eligible. Next slide. So these are our project steps, a little closer look at the process that the homeowner goes through. So the homeowner is approved to participate through an application process, and then once approved, the homeowner hires a DR to provide the design and soil test. And then they receive the Part 1 construction permit. These are all the steps that you all are well more familiar with than we are. You've certainly been doing it a lot longer. The homeowner is directed, after receiving their permitted design back from the county, they're directed to request 3 quotes from installers for the project. And then based on these quotes, the homeowner is approved to hire one of those installers. The project is then scheduled and completed, and that final invoice is provided back to us, back to the program manager. Then the managing organization, meaning one of our nonprofits, submits that invoice or those combination of invoices to ANRD, the Arkansas Natural Resources Division, for payment. All payment requests are submitted on the 15th of each month. The managing organization, again us, receives that funding back from ANRD and dispenses and provides payment funding to the homeowner by the 10th of the following month. That is to say, we receive payment by the 10th of the following month and issue to the homeowner. The homeowner then pays any remaining outstanding balance, if there is any, and there won't necessarily be any. It's not a requirement for the project design or the installation to the contractor that provided those services. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Shelley to touch on some of the specific questions that we've received over our first year from our industry partners related to working with the program.
Thank you, Matt. Are you guys going to continue to advance slides?
I will do it. You bet. I'll do my best. Let me know if I fall down.
So one of the most common questions that we get when we first start talking with homeowners is if their specific issue constitutes a failure and therefore would make them eligible for our program. And what we've given you here on this slide, and actually if you want to back up to the previous slide, because we've got a different picture there, are all examples of projects that we are currently working on or have worked on. And this is some of the failures that we have seen. That first picture was a collapsed septic tank. So you could see that the sewage is basically just pooling out of the house onto the ground there around where the tank is, but pretty much collapsed. So that was a big mess. You go on to the next one. So we see collapsed tanks. The picture on the left here is of what you all know to be as a straight pipe system, where there essentially is no septic system for the home. There is just sometimes a main line coming out of the house that goes directly into some type of pit. And what you're seeing in this picture is actually a cesspool that's being created downhill from the home where there just is no septic system. Straight pipe systems are eligible for the program. We generally have to approve those on a case-by-case basis, but they're not instances where someone has bought a piece of property and put a home on it and then applied for our program because they have no septic. This is more a situation where the homeowner's been there for a very long time, or maybe, it was a quote farmer's system that was quote installed by someone decades ago. So those are systems that we can remediate. The picture in the middle is a system where you're seeing some of the plumbing under the house on the right side of the photo, and then what's on the ground on the left side of the photo is the septic tank, which has collapsed, and there is backup happening. And so every time they use the plumbing inside the house, which a photo just can't accurately capture, it really needed to be a video, you're seeing wastewater just dropping directly underneath the house. There's backup, there's backflow happening, there's backup happening in the house, under the house, around the tank. So this is an instance where the system is very old. There is no permit on file for it, so we're not exactly sure what that system was, but there are failures in multiple parts and multiple components of that system. So this is a project that we're presently working on a remediation for. The picture on the right is a failed lateral line. We see failed lateral lines, failed lateral fields, crushed D boxes. We have seen systems that were at some point in time permitted and substantial enough for the home, but have just either not been maintained or become outdated, or were made with materials that are no longer preferred to be used. And so being quote old isn't necessarily going to make them eligible for the program. The system being old doesn't necessarily make them eligible for the program. But if the system is so old that it's not functioning properly because of breakdown in any number of areas in the components, then that is also considered a failure. So we have a pretty, as you all know, there are lots of ways these systems can break down. So we have a pretty broad definition of failure, and that really more so depends on the environmental health specialist at the health department. So if you encounter a homeowner with a system that you think is in failure and you're not sure if it would be considered a failure for our program, you are always welcome to reach out to us, and we will consult with the health department. And we really want to try to do everything we can to remediate as many systems as we can, for the sake of our water quality. We can go to the next one. So we have had a question come up occasionally about who is eligible to submit a bid for one of our projects. It is necessary that the installer be licensed through the Department of Health. So we have had some homeowners work with plumbers who could install, but these really must be licensed septic installers in order to bid a project. We often do direct homeowners to the health department's website to search the database to look for installers and designated representatives and such. However, we really love to hand a list of installers that are interested in taking on our grant projects over to homeowners. So if you are a septic installer and you would like to work with some of our projects, please do let us know so that we can pass your information along to the homeowners. As you know, there are a lot of installers in our area, but a lot of installers are very busy. So if you have interest in our projects and you have capacity to take them on, then please do let us know so that we can share that information with homeowners. A question that we do get a lot from installers wanting to understand how all of this works is if they bid on a project and are awarded that project, do they have to wait to get paid? And the answer to that is no, you do not have to wait to get paid. We do, as you could see earlier on in the presentation from the income guidelines, we do have the opportunity to help some low-income homeowners with this tremendous expense of remediating their septics. And a lot of the times we're finding that we're working with homeowners who need our program because they otherwise wouldn't have the money to fix the system without the help of the program. So we are finding installers that are willing to work with homeowners and willing to delay payment on the final invoice until after the homeowner has been reimbursed, but that is by no means a requirement. And there are, a number of installers that we've talked with that simply aren't interested in doing business that way. And so, if you have questions about a project or questions about a payment schedule, you are always welcome to reach out to us. And we do our very best. We submit all of our invoices for completed construction to A&RD on the 15th of the month. We're supposed to have payment from them in as little as 25 days. So, you know, in the history of our program thus far, we have not been late with that. So we think that we can really trim down that amount of time between when the project is finished and when your invoice could be fully paid. And we have had instances where homeowners were able to pay a deposit or a portion of the invoice up front, and then the installer was willing to wait for the remainder of the payment until the homeowner received reimbursement from us. So we do want to stress that the arrangement for payment is between you as an installer and the homeowner, but we will always help to clarify payment schedules and try to accommodate facilitating payments whenever we can. We can go to the next one. We do get this question a lot also, are there requirements for the quotes that we receive from installers? Yes, it's important that there's some identifying information on that quote as to who you are. If you have the ability to add and you know your license number from ADH and you can add that to it, that's fantastic. But it can be a formal invoice created as a PDF that can be emailed, text messaged. It can be handwritten on a piece of paper. The format in which we receive the quote is quite flexible. We just really need to have some identifying information for who you are as the installer. And you can then prepare the quote however you typically would. If you typically itemize and explain every part of the installation you're proposing, that's fine. If you typically just tally the expenses and the labor you intend to incur, that's fine as well. There are instances where installations require additional services that as a septic installer you might not provide. One of the things that we've run into quite a bit is to have tree removal for the location on the property where the new septic is going to go. We've also encountered instances where some electrical work has been needed to be done for pumps and other parts of the system that were going to be installed. So if there is a requirement to satisfy the installation and the design as the DR designed it, that you as an installer cannot provide, we have a couple of solutions for that. It can either be, you can subcontract that, or we can work with the homeowner to find a subcontractor to do that. But it's important that whenever possible, all the components of the installation are reflected on your invoice. And if you have questions about that, or this comes up in a project, please always reach back out to either the managing organizations that you're working with, and we can help clarify what will be needed to satisfy that requirement. And what needs to be included on the final invoice is, again, your identifying information, itemizing the invoice however you typically do that in your business. And then also, if there were any additional costs that were incurred that were unexpected, it is fine to include those. We just need a brief explanation as to why those additional costs were incurred. And also, any necessary services that the homeowner has to pay separately can just be referenced there. Go on to the next one, Matt. No two septic remediation projects seem to be the same, so we often encounter the question of what is paid for through our grant for any particular project. And we could probably distill it best by saying this: whatever is on the design that the designated representative has gotten approved with the health department is generally covered by our grant. Occasionally we need extra documentation for extra things that are maybe a little uncommon. But so far we have had tree removal, well abandonment, electrician services. We've had an instance of possible utility line relocation that's going to have to happen, and also a couple of instances where the old system has to be located in order to really well design what the new system is going to be, probably because it was an old system and there's no permit on file for it. And so they're not really clear what's under the ground and where it is. So we have had instances of needing to locate that old system, the cost for that to be approved as part of a project. And also any gray lines in the house that need to be tied into the system. We have encountered projects where there is a septic an on-site wastewater system, but there's a gray line also going, a gray water line going somewhere else. The grant will cover tying those in together as part of the remediation. And so one of the biggest questions is when will you receive payment as an installer? Generally, the DRs that are hired by homeowners are paid immediately. We don't typically have instances of homeowners delaying that payment until they are reimbursed through our program, although a designated representative is welcome to make that arrangement with the homeowner. We certainly don't ask them to do that. And then whatever payment arrangement the homeowner has come up with the installer is really between the homeowner and the installer. There is absolutely no obligation for you as an installer to extend any kind of credit or delayed due date on the invoice. Although we are incredibly grateful when you're able to do that for especially some of our low income projects. So, you know, what we've generally been able to see is that we invoice ANRD on the 15th of the month, and we usually have payment by the 10th of the following month. And we have had instances where I, as a program manager for this, have met both the homeowner and the installer at the bank and exchanged payments all the way around. So we handed a reimbursement to the homeowner, who then handed a payment to the installer, and everyone was satisfied. So we really try to turn that payment around to get payment back to the installer as quickly as possible. Our friends at the Natural Resource Division are very sensitive to that for installers, and it's everybody's objective in this program to get you all paid as quickly as possible. And if you have any questions, this is our contact information.